this is Mike Dilk with the Relax Back UK show on UK Health Radio, your global real feel-good radio station. On the Relax Back UK show, we explore all kinds of health topics, so keep listening and enjoy the ride. Hi, and thank you for joining me, Mike Dilk, on the Relax Back UK show. You are one in over 1 million. You really are, because UK Health Radio has over 1 million listeners each month, and that's a lot of people. Okay, so I hope the summer's going well for you. I hope you're enjoying the school holidays and your children aren't too bored. My eldest has been listening to lots of podcasts, actually, and I asked if she'd listen to any of my Relax Back UK shows. She was kind of non-committal. But if you want to listen to a few more and you want to maybe listen to some of the past shows, that's easy to do. You can go to the UK Health Radio website, find me on the presenter list. That's me, Mike Dilk, where I'm on the list of presenters, and click the Relax Back UK show. And all the past available shows will be there, so you can click on any one you want to listen to. Or you can go to my website, which is relaxbackuk.com. Click on the radio tab and you can see all the topics that are there, and if you click on those topics you can get a short video by way of an intro, and you can really see why I've chosen radio. You will see that I do actually have the face for radio. My guest today for this week is Dr. Callie Seaman from Aqua Labs and also MedCan Support. She is an expert in hydroponics and also how medicines derived from cannabis can help many, many people.
Things like barbiturates, things like your opiates, you can't overdose on this. It doesn't connect to the system where it stops you breathing.
She herself suffers from epilepsy and uses prescribed cannabis medicines, and is also a great guest and wonderful to listen to. So please do hang around for a great show. Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed chatting with this week's guest, Callie Seaman, and she has a PhD. And my first question to her was, what is your PhD actually in?
Fertilizer chemistry. So I actually did my PhD. It was in hydroponics, and we were exploring the movement of elements and the effects of those actual elements that are fed to the plants on their production of things like secondary metabolites and how they're metabolized through the actual plant. So I'm a plant chemist as such, and looking at the biochemistry of those and the compounds that they're producing, particularly medicinal plants.
All right. So are a lot of plants that we use and eat and all the rest of it actually grown using hydroponics at the minute? Or I always thought hydroponics was a bit kind of sci-fi.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely sci-fi, but a lot of people don't realise that 80% of the produce in supermarkets is hydroponically grown. So the reason we have strawberries in the middle of winter is because they're hydroponically grown in, say, Spain. So hydroponics is the growth of plants without soil. So you replace the soil with something like sand or rock wool, like the insulation material that you put into your roof, or you can grow it in pure water as well. So you've got something called deep water culture. But yeah, everybody does associate it with that kind of sci-fi feeling, and it is what we will use if we go to other planets in order to be able to sustain ourselves and produce food for the future.
You just said something. A percentage of our food that we buy in a supermarket grown with hydroponics. What was that figure? Was it 80?
That was 80%. It was. I would have to actually check the actual statistics now, because everybody's becoming a lot more aware of organics. So they're actually being more aware of how their food is being grown and actually requesting organic food. And this is primarily what the difference is when you buy something that's organic, it tends to be grown in a manner where pesticides aren't used. But things like your tomatoes and your cucumbers and peppers, majority of those that you find in the supermarkets are hydroponically grown within a greenhouse.
Goodness me. So this is a man in the street question now, because I don't know much about this stuff. I would have thought if you grow, say, your tomatoes in water, there's much less chance of little buggy things eating them before we can. So you could grow things in water, hydroponics, and call it organic. Could you?
Well, this is the really kind of strange grey area with it all. So the idea of organics is that you're not using any processed fertilizers. Hydroponics does require processed fertilizers. You can use organic fertilizers with it, but it can cause more problems such as algal growth in there as well. So there's this kind of balancing act between the two. But basically, hydroponics, the true definition of it is cultivation without soil. It's soilless cultivation. So yes, you could, not a problem. So if you replaced the soil with, say, hay, that would be organics, but it's all about what you're putting onto it and how it's been sourced as well.
God, fascinating. I think we might have to come back for another whole program on this, because we've sort of uncovered an area which I hadn't really realized that you were an expert on. So fascinating. Let's park that and kind of move on to what I was thinking we might chat about. And really, this kind of is related to your MedCan support, which is that a charity that you set up?
Well, yes, it's a community interest company that we've set up at the beginning of this year. It actually just started at the beginning of lockdown as a kind of Facebook group where we brought together, there was Matt Hughes who actually initially started this with Hannah Deakin, who is one of the parents whose child has received one of the first medical cannabis prescriptions on the NHS. And they came together and they'd actually had to teach themselves about cannabis and about those the medicines and what's involved, because there was nothing out of there. They'd gone to the Netherlands and looked elsewhere and wanted to bring together all the knowledge that they had gained and help to support other families with children with refractory epilepsy, because they'd seen such a positive effect that it had on their children. They asked me to join the team because I was part of a licensed cultivation facility within the UK and been working with a number as well. And I happen to be epileptic as well, which as an adult, I can give a true perspective on that. So
Right.
we came together with Jade Proudman as well of Savage Cabbage, and we'd formed this group
Savage
that was helping.
What a great name for a company that is. All right.
Oh, fantastic. Jade has a wealth of knowledge. She's been to the States, and if you come across Charlotte's Web, Charlotte Fig was one of the first actual children that it was really put into the media about her epilepsy, and the Stanley brothers actually growing cannabis and extracting it so that she could use it to help to control her epilepsy. And this is one of the first kind of original stories that came along, and one of the kind of first inspirations for myself as well, to really sort of take this further. And
Okay.
as I say, we all came together to form this group to help educate parents, because there's very little information out there that is good and factual.
Yeah.
A lot of it is by...
So the summary kind of is, MedCan stands for medicinal cannabis, and your interest is from two areas, really, in that you have epilepsy, and these medicines help you personally, I guess, right now. And also, you have a big skill that you can bring to the table because you're an expert at growing things in different ways, growing things in water. You're an expert in growing things. So this all seems to come together perfectly naturally. Yes,
it was almost like it was fate.
Well, look, let's talk about actually growing cannabis then, because to have medicines derived from cannabis, you've actually got to grow the stuff in the first place. How do you do that? I mean, so in this country, presumably you can't just start growing it because you need a special license or something. Is that right?
That's correct. Now, yes, cannabis is actually a scheduled drug. So in order to actually cultivate, consume, or even possess, you require a license to do that. Now we've got in 2018, there was a change in the law. So actually, medicinal cannabis could be prescribed. It's strange how it took us till 2018 for that to actually occur when this has been around for thousands of years. But to actually cultivate in this country, there's two forms of licenses. You're probably familiar with hemp, which is used for bedding, which is used to actually feed animals as well, can be turned into hempcrete. This is one type of license, and these are very low in the medicinal compounds, so the compounds that are active and help people medicinally, and you're not allowed to actually extract from those. That's one kind of license. So you've got that industrial hemp. You've then got what they call high THC, anything above, well, they're classifying anything above your 0.2% to be high THC. And that's a different form of license that's required. And that the actual produce then can have the oils extracted from it so that they can be used and turned into medicines.
So THC is the stuff that is active in the plant.
That's one of the active compounds. This is the amazing thing about cannabis. Everybody knows about THC. This is what everyone knows about, that creates that stoned effect that gets you high. It is the psychotropic effect that affects. We then have CBD, which also is psychoactive, not psychotropic, but it has more of an anti-inflammatory effect, is one of the effects, and it works in conjunction with THC. And then we've got other compounds such as CBG. We've got CBC, and there are 140 different cannabinoids within cannabis. Then we've not even moved on to the terpenes. So we've got something called terpenes, which are what produce the smell. Now, you're probably very familiar with these. So when you've got lavender in your garden, it's producing that lovely, distinctive lavender smell. That's a terpene called linalool, which has, again, another medicinal effect. You've got other things like camphorine. You've got pinene, which pine trees produce. That's that distinctive pine smell. Yeah. There are hundreds of terpenes as well. And then we've got flavonoids, and we'll not go into all the other compounds, but all of these compounds work together to actually have more of a benefit than the individual compounds, such as CBD alone. And these are within the oils that's found in the flowers of the plants.
Okay, goodness me. So are there different types of cannabis plant then? Because you at the start you said there's hemp. Is that one different sort of cannabis plant which is, has these other uses that you described?
So you've got what's known as strains. Just like how you've got potatoes, you've got a Jersey Royal, and you've got a Morris Piper. You've got exactly the same in the cannabis world. You've got different varieties of it. Right. And that's usually to do with where it comes from, where it's derived from. So if it's come from Afghanistan, or if it's come from Europe, and these different kind of strains have got different ratios of the compounds which I mentioned. And these will also grow in different manners, depending on where they're actually derived from, where they actually sort of come from. But now there's been a lot of hybridization of these. So there's been a lot of crossing of them to actually produce what's known as hybrids. So you don't have as many of your land racers, or you don't have those pure breeds that as such. So we kind of, in a simple terms, we separate into indicas and sativas. So your indicas tend to be a lot shorter. They tend to be a lot shorter flowering time. And then you've got your sativas, which tend to be a lot bigger plants. And again, this all depends where they're actually derived from. And both these plants will produce different ratios. But because these have been actually crossed so many times now, it's hard to actually say if something's an indica or sativa. You've got hybrids, and it should be more looked at the predominant cannabinoids are within that plant, or if it's broadly.
This is sounding like Gardener's Question Time on Radio 4 now, of which I'm an avid fan. But having said that, this is, if I was to start growing this stuff in my back garden, this would be illegal. So we'll move away from the Gardener's Question Time idea. But effectively, I guess, so some of these plants are better medicinally than others, or possibly better for medicines for different things. Is that right?
Correct. So it's very dependent on the person. So yourself every single one of us has what's what's known as an endocannabinoid system within you. It is what helps to reduce stress down. So when you actually experience a high amount of stress, you release a number of chemicals, such as adrenaline, which go very high, which help you at that point in time. The endocannabinoid system helps to bring that back into balance, back into what's known as homeostasis. And it helps also with communication between the different systems within the body as well. Unfortunately, this isn't actually taught within medical school, the endocannabinoid system, but that is changing. Thanks to people like the MCCS, they are helping to actually talk to doctors about that. And this is part of what we want to do at MedCan Support as well, is to help to bring it to the public's attention and bring it to doctors' attention and nurses' attentions and all healthcare workers, so that they can learn about this, so they can understand the potential of cannabis. Now, each plant will have...
Sorry, I interrupted you there, but I carry on. I think it must be kind of this sort of medicine potentially tarnished with the brush of, oh, it's illegal. We can't possibly use that or be interested in that because it's illegal. Therefore, if you're not a real doctor if you think this is potentially interesting or useful for your patients.
You've hit the nail on the head there. This is part of the problem, the stigma associated with the actual recreational world, because that's where it's very popular, and that's actually where the stigma's been attached to. There was a lot of prohibition occurred in the US that actually then fell over here into the UK as well, and this was happening back in the 1950s, and there was this whole kind of prohibition connected to it, which actually stopped it being prescribed and used medicinally, and it was seen as the word marijuana. It was used actually as propaganda against and racism against the Mexicans, associating it with being lazy, not getting anything done, and this stigma stuck to it. And so doctors kind of dismissed its use, and things such as aspirin came along, which was a much more stronger painkiller. Things like morphine as well, which actually there was an individual compound there and was able to deal with the problem much quicker. Cannabis works in a very different way. It's all about bringing balance and needing to actually regularly consume in order to bring balance to your system. Cannabis itself is not this big silver bullet all of a sudden, but if used correctly, can certainly improve lives. And I've seen it actually cure cancer as well. And I'm saying that quite loosely. So when I say cure cancer, it's something that needs to be done over a period of time. And it's only certain types. And a maintenance dose needs to be actually given with that. So it doesn't cure it completely. But what it will do is with maintenance, it keeps it at bay.
All right. We might have to return to that. I often ask my guests for published papers and work done, all that sort of thing. So we maybe come back to that with a warning. I will be asking.
You may want to add.
Yes,
I can give you lots of papers on epilepsy, not a problem. The cancer one, there is papers on it, but it's still very much in its. There's a lot more work needs doing on that, I believe, as well.
All right. So let's just talk about sort of actually your work with Aqua Labs. So is a lot of your work to look at how to increasing the yield of the particular plants that are of interest for making individual medicines? Like you were talking about hydroponics. Is that what you spend a lot of your time doing?
Yes, exactly that. So it's looking at stress techniques. Basically, you need to first look at the genetics of the plant and what that genetic potential is. If the plant doesn't have the genetic makeup to produce a particular compound, say THCV, which is very good for treating epilepsy, you will never get the plant to produce that. So the first thing is the genetics of the plant, right. And then enhancing the growing environment. So a lot of these compounds are produced, these what we call secondary metabolites, are produced as a defense mechanism to the plant. So because a plant is being attacked by something, it may produce the terpenes as an insecticide or to deter insects from actually attacking it. The actual cannabinoids with them are produced as a sunscreen. So what they found, if plants that are actually subjected to high levels of radiation will increase in levels of THC and other cannabinoids in there. So part of what I do is actually look at all of these conditions and look at these kind of stress techniques, such as drought as well, to help enhance the particular compounds of interest within the plant, at the same time as increasing the biomass that's needed.
Yeah, all right. So biomass, you mean just the yield, how much of the stuff these plants make?
Yes.
Okay. I was thinking about this. Some of this information could be of interest to the wrong sort of people. I mean, because undoubtedly there are people that grow these plants to sell them illegally. So is there an element of secrecy of what you do in what you do?
I've been working in the hydroponic industry now for 20 years, and I have hid a lot of what I have done. I have taught a lot of people how to grow cannabis over the years, and I'm not ashamed of that anymore. A lot of sick people, a lot of people who wanted to just self-medicate and not have to associate themselves with the criminal element of it. They wanted to be self-sufficient and grow a couple of plants so that they could treat their ailments themselves and not have to deal with that. Unfortunately, yes, you're right. There is a criminal element to it, and there is large gangs. But hopefully, through this, bringing it to the mainstream and allowing people to understand more of this, and these clinics that are being set up so people can go and can get it from a reliable source and know exactly what they're actually getting. So they know if it's high in THC, or they know what the terpene profile is within it. And things are changing. I believe that people should be allowed to grow their own. You know, they should be allowed to be self-sufficient. However, there's always, with any industry, DVDs, there was a criminal element to it where there was people copying those many years ago as well. But how we tackle this, it is a difficult one.
Yeah.
And things are changing.
Again, it could be the topic of another show, actually, because this is a vast area, isn't it? A huge area. One thing
Massive area.
Yeah. One thing I am really interested in for you personally, how your interest in this field started, because you actually have a medical use for this, don't you?
Yes. At the age of 15, I had a seizure at school. A grand mal, a tonic-clonic seizure at school, and was diagnosed with having a low threshold to epilepsy. I was very quickly put onto a drug called clomazepam. Clomazepine, not clomazepam, I apologise, clomazepine. And I was very quickly put onto that. And my dad didn't like it at all. He didn't like the way that the doctors weren't really interested in me. They were very we'll just up the dose. They didn't really sort of look at my lifestyle at all. And he consumed cannabis for a number of years and introduced me to it then. And this was back in 1995. This was before published work on the endocannabinoid system had occurred. This was before we really knew the science behind the endocannabinoid system. And he always encouraged me to, rather than drinking, to consume cannabis to help control seizures. I carried on doing that for many years, came off the clomazepine, and
did that work?
Didn't really suffer many seizures.
That worked for you?
Yes, it did. It kept them under control. It stopped me drinking as well. So I stayed away from alcohol. The way I knew that it was actually working is when I was completing my PhD when I was 37, and I actually stopped consuming in order to write up, to try and finish that. Due to the amount of stress I was having then as well, I started having seizures again and actually smashed my face up from collapsing in a toilet and hitting my head on the sink on the way down. I smashed my tooth, and at this point I was still very much in denial. And it wasn't until I sort of got involved in the medicinal side of things and saw Carly Barton speaking in the House of Parliament and saw Anna Deakin speaking about her son, did I actually start to realise that I'd been using this many years medicinally and not realised I had been.
Okay, all right. Well, so that's interesting. So, but did you use it as a recreational thing as well?
I used to use it so that I would sleep on a night. So it would be just how somebody would have a glass of wine on an evening. It would be, I didn't drink. And I would have a smoke instead. Me and my husband would do that on an evening once my son was in bed. So yeah, yes, you could say it was recreational, but I actually found out I was using it medicinally. I now have a prescription. I went to at the beginning of this year. Unfortunately, what I received in my prescription was not what I was expecting. It was of lower quality than I expected. But what it did do was fuel the fire to help improve this and help improve the access for people who aren't able to actually produce their own. They're not able to do this. So I wanted to actually help improve the standards that we've got in this country and help to put those standards into place so that people are getting consistent products.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So it is now legal. You said you can prescribe this, or people can prescribe this since, what was the date? 2018, you said?
Correct, yes, yeah. 2018, November 2018.
Yeah. So, but if people do get this stuff, these sort of medicines on prescription, you're saying they're quite variable. So that's not a great situation, is it? What?
You're right. It's not a good situation we're in at the moment, but we're very much in the infancy of this industry in this country. We've got a lot to learn. We're looking at countries like Australia and Denmark and Europe as well, and over in the US and how they're dealing with it. Canada is another prime example. We've got a lot to learn here and a lot of process to put into place, because this is still, as I say, at its infancy. And I'm hoping to be somebody who will help to put those changes into place and to put that regulation into place that we so desperately need.
So medicines that are produced from the cannabis plant, they must be available internationally. So if some countries are much better at producing medicines, and they're produced consistently, so from 1 month to the next that this medicine. Actually, how do you take it? Is it a pill?
There's many forms.
Right,
so
okay.
You can get it as an oil. So you can use it as a tincture that you would use sublingually. So you put it under the tongue.
Yeah.
You can also, there's also flour. So that's the distinctive as what is like the flour, which then can be placed into a vaporizer. It can be in the form of gummies. It could be a pill as well. So it could be ground so that people can take it. But the effects are quite different if you're actually vaporizing in comparison to taking it orally. Because when you're actually taking cannabis or any cannabinoids orally, it goes in and it's processed through the liver. So you produce an 11-hydroxy form of this, which is a very different compound to how THC is decarboxylated from the acid form to the decarboxylated form. It's then absorbed through the lungs and then goes to the brain and has the effect there. And the actual effects are a lot shorter as well. So there are different forms, and this again is what we're doing at MedCan Support. We're helping to educate people about the different forms, particularly for children. A lot of those are sublingually, so there are oil forms that they receive theirs, and it's a lot easier to dose that than using a vaporizer. That tends to be more for pain, so for an instant relief, and people find it to be very good for that.
Okay, so I was saying, if these different drugs are available internationally, and in countries that have been using them for a while, is there not a system of making sure that they're all consistent in other countries that we can kind of piggyback on or copy?
We're looking towards doing that, yes. I think one of the things that we really do need is a domestic supply. What we need is it to be produced in this country, because what a lot of the holdups are is actually coming into the country and going through importation as well. And then you've got a number of layers there as well. So you've got companies that are involved in doing that are all taking a slice off as well. So it's actually increasing the cost of the product as well as the travelling of the product. My actual prescription, the flower itself came from Australia, all the way from Australia to here to get to me, which I find insane. I find it absolutely insane when we could be producing this in this country. reducing down the air miles on it, reducing down the carbon footprint, and actually creating an industry in this country itself. And it being made, within this country to the needs of the people within this country, instead of it coming all the way from another country, that it's just kind of, right, that's what we can get hold of. That's what we will bring into the country and make available to the patients.
And so that process must put the price up as well. If your medicine's coming from Australia, bringing it all that way is going to make it more expensive. And actually, I've been speaking to other people about the cost of this medicine. So some people can get it on prescription from the NHS, and some people have to buy it privately. And they were talking about hundreds of pounds a month. And that seemed kind of strange to me, because essentially, you grow it. Okay, you need some expertise to grow it, and those are available in the country. You've got them. I'm sure other people can do it as well. But you grow the stuff, and then you have to convert that into a medicine of some sort. But it just surprised me that the end result was so expensive. What's going on there? Why is it so expensive?
So there's a number of reasons. So usually a lot of these facilities are indoor facilities. So they will use artificial light to grow them, to make them more secure. And we spoke about the hygiene side of things, that hydroponics, you can be in a lot more control of the bugs there. So there's less need to use for pesticides. But because it's an indoor facility and artificial light, that has an electricity bill that goes with it. You've then got that time that it actually takes to produce. So it can be a 12-week cycle is an average. So that over that period of time, that's a lot of energy that's being used to do that. There's then the man hours that go into that as well. So the labour that's involved in actually them turning that into a medicine. The problem with the importing is you've got importing charges there as well. So you've got all of these layers that go on top. Hence why the need for the domestic supply is needed. Then you haven't got the transportation costs. You're going to need special transportation because this is a controlled substance. So you can't just let anybody, you can't just put it, give it to Royal Mail and, £5.50 and send it on its way. It really does need to be.
Yeah, actually, my experience is the Royal Mail is a lot more expensive than that at the moment. I've had some shocks with Royal Mail recently, but anyway, that's one side. All right, so this all adds up, and it does become prohibitive for people that would find this particularly useful. All right, let's
definitely. Particularly for families of children with refractory epilepsy, their oils. At one point, it was costing some of the families nearly £2,000 a month in order to be able to have the prescriptions. And you mentioned there are very few prescriptions on the NHS. Majority of, I would say, 90%, if not more, 95% of the prescriptions are private. So on top of that, not only have you got to pay for the prescription, you've got to pay to see the doctor in order to get the prescription as well. And these all add up, and it's really not fair.
It does seem that because it helps so many people. So I anecdotally, I've been talking to people, and it really does seem to improve the lives of a lot of people. Not only that, say, if an epileptic, say, because of these medicines, they're not going to hospital a lot, which is expensive. They can work, so they can pay taxes. It seems like a crazy thing not to pursue. But let's just, you mentioned a little bit earlier some of the things that it helps people with. So you yourself, you're an epileptic, so it helps you with epilepsy. You mentioned cancer. What other things can it potentially help people with?
Oh, everything. When I say everything, and it's sometimes when you start reading about it,
sound very scientific, I have to say, Callie.
No. So anxiety is a good one. Right. Depression it can help with. Pain is a really big helping with pain management and reduction in the use of opioids, reduction in the use of really addictive drugs which are causing liver damage as well. It can help with fibromyalgia. It can help with, I've actually seen videos of helping with Parkinson's disease. I've seen numerous different diseases it to help with. It's not, as I say, it is not the silver bullet. It is a quality of life improver. So it can help nausea as well, particularly people who are doing chemotherapy. It helps with the nausea, is there to reduce that down. For me, it helps with insomnia as well. So it helps me to sleep. One of the golden rules of being an epileptic is sleep. You must sleep. Cannabis helps with my sleep and to keep me having, naturally good high quality sleep, which may sound bizarre, but I need high quality sleep, undisturbed. The list goes on and on and on. And it is also, I also believe that it is nutrition for the body. We have this, what I've spoke about, the endocannabinoid system, and actually maintaining that can just help to give you a wellness, a maintenance, such as you take your supplements like your cod oil for your omega-3s. CBD, it can be the same, that it is a supplement that just helps to maintain this homeostasis within your body.
Okay. Now, at the start of the chat, I mentioned that I like papers and scientific peer-reviewed papers. And you said, yeah, there's plenty of epilepsy. So research has actually happened for epilepsy, has it? And what sort of
there's research. So there's been a big change in the last kind of 3 years. The amount of papers being published has gone up more than 100%. Got a very interesting paper that actually talks about this. The change between 2015 and 2020. The actual amount of papers been published on cannabis and the effects on things like cancer, the effects on epilepsy, the effects on pain management. There's such a breadth out there of these different papers on different ailments and the effects on it. But yet, for some reason in this country, we keep being told there's not enough research. The problem is it's so obsessed with what's known as random RCTs, randomized controlled trials. Now, as I mentioned, that there are hundreds of compounds within cannabis. There are, and these all work together to produce something what's known as the entourage effect. Random controlled trials do not work with the entourage effect. Those kinds of trials don't take this into consideration because there's too many variables in it. It likes one control, one substance, so we can have one outcome from it or two outcomes. Very simple. What we need is real world evidence. And MedCan support is something else. What we're trying to do is actually bring studies together to actually provide this. And we've been part with drug science. We've been part of some of those studies to actually provide this real world evidence and the effects on seizure control within children.
Okay, so you're saying there's a difficulty with doing effectively double-blind studies because of the number of active ingredients in these medicines.
Correct, yes.
Okay, but could you not have very well-controlled medicines that have the same high number of active controlled substances and do a double-blind study using that?
The way that they work, as I say, cannabis does not fit into this. It doesn't fit into this model which is accepted within this country. It's real-world evidence. It's a little bit like if you're looking at food. You wouldn't do randomized controlled studies on the effects of carrots on your health. It would be real-world evidence that's used. And this needs to be taken more into consideration. And I think it's actually getting the doctors to be more comfortable with this medicine and have a better understanding of it. And that's part of it, as well as the education and the actual just knowing about the endocannabinoid system itself.
All right, so we've spoken about testing these medicines. And again, that's another big area. I would be fascinated to revisit that at some point. I don't know anything about testing drugs, but I'm sure there's a statistician out there somewhere who does and has done work on medicines produced from cannabis. So if you're listening, or indeed if you know one, Callie, that could be quite an interesting chat to have in the future. But let me ask another question. At the start of the discussion, you mentioned cancer and potentially using these sorts of medicines to alleviate cancer, or, well, actually you said cure cancer. Now, I can imagine them being used to help people if they're suffering from pain, or if they are suffering from the side effects of some of the treatments for cancer. But actually curing cancer, I think I might be struggling with that a little bit. So tell us a bit more about that.
So yeah, this is one that when I first saw this, it can cure. No, don't be silly. Don't. So doing some reading, and somebody called Rick Simpson, and he did the whole book he wrote about Phoenix tears and about producing a highly concentrated oil from the actual cannabis plant. That is what's known as a whole plant extract. It's got everything in the worts as well. So it's got all of the terpenes, it's got all of the cannabinoids in there. And a 60-day treatment, you actually taking 90 grams of this over a period of time has been shown to reduce tumours. I've known people to actually put it onto skin cancer and the skin cancer to disappear. Now, I know it sounds absolutely crazy, but there is more studies need to be done into this. I've seen it happen, and I know people who have to regularly have maintenance dose. Callie Blackwell is another prime example of her son, and actually giving it to her son. And I would encourage anybody to read One in a Million, a book, the boy One in a Million that Callie actually wrote. It was an amazing journey that she went through, and her son had been diagnosed with cancer at a young age, and she decided to start giving it him. And the cancer started to recede. The tumours started to actually get smaller. And there are hundreds of people and hundreds of these stories. And I still don't understand to this day why it's not being investigated further in this country. And all we're doing is either using radiotherapy or chemotherapy. It's crazy. Why shouldn't we try this when there's never been one recorded fatality from the use of cannabis? If you have too much, it can be a little bit of an unpleasant experience, but you go to sleep and wake up and everything's fine. It's impossible to overdose on this. There is no toxicity to it. As I say, they can cause you to feel a bit sick and dizzy and need to go to sleep. And at the time, it can feel like you're dying. But you're not going to die. You physically, unlike things like barbiturates, things like your opiates, you can't overdose on this. It doesn't connect to the system where it stops you breathing.
Right. Well, certainly a lot of drugs aimed at painkillers, you can overdose on those, and there's that's a big problem at the moment, isn't it? So, goodness me, we have covered a lot of stuff there, absolutely fascinating, and possibly open the door to discuss a few more topics in a bit more depth. But really interesting, Callie. Thank you so much. What I think people might find useful is if they've been listening to this and thinking, actually, my child suffers from epilepsy, or I suffer from epilepsy, perhaps something like this can help me. A couple of times you've mentioned MedCan support. And so if people want to get a bit more information, is that a good resource for them?
I would highly recommend it. It goes through everything from the basics of what cannabis is, talks about the different compounds on there. There's links to actually peer-reviewed journals on there. So we've actually put a section on there so people can actually go and get their hard research. We're not just this is not anecdotal. We're actually providing research that they can take to their doctors. So they've got any questions that they want to take to their doctors about their condition, and present this data to them and show them and get them the doctors to start questioning this being used as a medicine, and if they can then start prescribing it. We've also got links to support groups as well. So there's a whole support group there of other parents who are in similar situations, who understand what it's like to care for a child with epilepsy. And if cannabis is something you're considering as part of your regime and part of the medicine, we can help there. And it goes through the different kinds of medicines, how it's actually extracted. And we talk about the family life as well. And we've just recently took on board a new ambassador, Mel Sykes, which we're really, really excited about. And we're going to be, helping to educate people more. There's a number of different places to look, but you can check out myself, Dr. Callie Seaman, on any of kind of the social media platforms as well, and give me a follow. And you can reach out to me if you need any kind of advice or help. I'm here to help.
Okay. And what's the website of MedCan Support? If you just Google MedCan Support, do you go straight to it?
Yes, it'll get you there straight away. And as I say again, we've got Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. That's where it really started, was Facebook. Put MedCan Support in, you'll find us no problems.
Okay, lovely. Callie, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. Absolutely fascinating.
Not a problem. It's been a pleasure.
So many thanks to my guest this week, who is Dr. Callie Seaman of Aqua Labs and MedCan Support. And of course, thank you to you for listening. Was the Relax Back UK show with me, Mike Dill. Thank you for listening, and please do join us again next time.